My family ghosted my product launch, the one where I pitched to 300 investors with shaking hands and a dream I'd mortgaged my entire 20s for. No congratulations text. No we're proud of you call. Just the same cold silence I'd learned to expect from the Hartley household. So when TechCrunch published my company's Series B valuation at $4 to $7 million, I wasn't holding my breath for confetti. Then Dad's name flashed across my phone screen. The text was vintage Richard Hartley, 3 sentences that managed to sound like a court order: family dinner. Cascade Steakhouse. Saturday at 6. We have matters to discuss. I read it twice, standing in my Tribeca loft with the Hudson River glinting behind me like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. My coffee went cold in my hand as I stared at those words. Matters to discuss. Not congratulations. Not we saw the news. Just business speak from the man who'd once told me that software companies were smoke and mirrors for people afraid of real work. I should have deleted it right there. But here's the thing about family: even when they've spent years making you feel invisible, some stubborn part of you keeps a candle burning in the window. Some foolish corner of your heart that remembers being 7 years old, waiting by the elementary school curb for a parent who showed up 40 minutes late because a client meeting ran over. Again. My assistant Myra walked in carrying a stack of term sheets that needed signatures. She took one look at my face and set them down carefully. You okay, Jess? My father wants to have dinner. The father who skipped your launch party. That's the one. She knew enough of my history to understand the weight of those words. You don't have to go. I looked back at the message, at that clinical phrasing that somehow made a family dinner sound like a deposition. The old version of me, the one who'd slept on an air mattress in Queens and survived on bodega coffee and ambition, would have shown up early, desperate to prove something. But I wasn't that version anymore. Still, I texted back, I'll be there. Because sometimes you need to see the trap clearly before you can finally walk away from it for good. The Cascade sat on the Connecticut side of Greenwich, the kind of place where senators and hedge fund managers went to be seen not eating their $100 steaks. I'd been there exactly twice before, once for Grandfather Hartley's 80th birthday, where I'd sat at the kids' table despite being 23, and once for my brother Trevor's engagement party, where Dad spent the whole night introducing Trevor's fiancée as the daughter I never had while I stood 3 feet away. Good times. I parked my Tesla in the back lot, tucked between a Bentley and someone's weekend Porsche. For a second, I considered taking the old Honda Civic I'd kept from my startup days, the one with the dent in the passenger door and the check engine light that had been on since 2019. Showing up in that would have reinforced everything they believed about me, that I was still struggling, still scrambling, still the family charity case who'd wandered off to play entrepreneur. But I was done making myself smaller to make them comfortable. The hostess recognized our family name immediately and led me toward the private dining room. My heels clicked against marble floors that probably cost more than my first office lease. Everything here smelled like old money and older beef, that particular scent of exclusivity that made people whisper instead of laugh. Through the frosted glass doors, I could see their silhouettes. Dad's distinctive posture, straight-backed like he was perpetually posing for an oil painting. Mom's carefully styled silver hair catching the chandelier light. Trevor gesturing with his wine glass, probably mid-story about his latest real estate acquisition. And Brandon, my youngest brother, hunched over his phone like he was mining for cryptocurrency in the Instagram algorithm. They looked like a tableau from a lifestyle magazine. American success story, the Hartley dynasty. What they actually were was a family business bleeding money from a dozen different wounds, held together by pride and my father's refusal to admit he'd made mistakes. I knew because I'd had my corporate attorney pull their financials 3 weeks ago. I pushed open the door, and 4 faces turned toward me with practiced smiles that didn't quite reach anyone's eyes. Whatever was coming, I was ready for it. Or so I thought. Jess. Mom stood first, arms extended like we were filming a reunion scene for reality television. Her hug lasted exactly 2 seconds, long enough to seem affectionate, short enough to avoid actual intimacy. You look exhausted, honey. Are you sleeping enough? You know stress ages you. Nothing like a maternal health assessment disguised as concern. Classic Linda Hartley. Dad remained seated, but offered a nod that might have been approval or indigestion, hard to tell with him. Good of you to make time for us. Trevor raised his glass in mock salute. Look who finally emerged from her coding cave. How's the tech world treating you? Can't complain, I said, sliding into the empty chair they'd left, directly across from Dad, like I was about to defend my dissertation. Business is good. We saw, Brandon mumbled, not looking up from his phone. TechCrunch article made the rounds. Pretty impressive valuation for a, what do you call it again? B2B SaaS platform for supply chain optimization, I said flatly. Right. He nodded like I'd just explained quantum physics. That. The waiter appeared with menus, but Dad waved him off. We'll start with the Wagyu carpaccio, then the lobster bisque. For the main, let's do the porterhouse, rare, family style. He hadn't asked anyone what they wanted. He never did. The small talk started like a card dealer shuffling a marked deck. Mom asked about my apartment with that tone suggesting she hoped I'd move somewhere more suitable. Trevor talked about closing a $14 million commercial property deal in Stamford. Brandon mentioned his cryptocurrency portfolio was absolutely crushing it this quarter, which probably meant he'd made enough for a used jet ski. Nobody mentioned my valuation directly. Nobody said congratulations. Nobody asked about the actual work, the 3 years of 18-hour days, the failed prototypes, the pitch meetings where VCs treated me like I was selling magazine subscriptions door to door. Instead, they talked around me, near me, occasionally at me, but never quite with me. Then Dad set down his whiskey glass with that decisive thunk he used when switching from pleasantries to business. So, Jess, he said, folding his hands like he was about to deliver quarterly earnings. We wanted to discuss an opportunity. One that could benefit everyone at this table. And there it was. The real reason I'd been summoned. Trevor leaned forward with that expression he wore in his LinkedIn photos. Confident, trustworthy, completely manufactured. Dad's being modest. This isn't just an opportunity. It's legacy work. The Hartley Properties portfolio, Dad continued, has been the backbone of this family for 40 years. Your grandfather built it from nothing. I've expanded it. And now we're positioned for the next evolution. I stayed quiet, watching. This was choreographed. We're planning a comprehensive renovation of the flagship property downtown, Mom added, touching my hand with cold fingers. The Regent Hotel. Your father's vision is extraordinary. Rooftop restaurant, reimagined conference facilities, luxury spa. It'll be the crown jewel of Connecticut hospitality. The Regent Hotel was a 1970s relic with plumbing issues and asbestos that probably predated the Carter administration. I'd seen the Yelp reviews. 2.5 stars. Someone had titled their feedback, "I've slept in nicer bus stations." Sounds ambitious, I said carefully. It is, Trevor agreed. Which is why we're bringing it to family first. Before outside investors dilute the ownership structure. Brandon finally looked up from his phone. We're all chipping in. I'm liquidating part of my crypto position. Trevor's refinancing the Stamford building. It's a family effort. Dad's eyes locked onto mine with that intensity he usually reserved for business negotiations and arguments about thermostat settings. We need $2 million, Jess. Just a bridge loan until the construction financing comes through. Your company's valuation suggests you have access to that kind of capital. There it was. $2 million. Said so casually you'd think he was asking to borrow my car. You'd be a full partner, Mom assured me quickly. Not just an investor, an owner. Part of the family legacy. Legacy. They loved that word. As if shared DNA and a last name automatically entitled them to my success. We'd structure it properly, Dad continued. Legal documentation, interest payments, the whole thing. This isn't charity, it's opportunity. The Regent renovation will triple the property value. Conservative estimate. Trevor nodded. We're talking about generational wealth, Jess. Real assets. Not just digital valuations that could evaporate with the next market correction. Digital valuations. There it was. The dismissal wrapped in concern, the subtle suggestion that my success was somehow less legitimate than theirs. I took a sip of water, letting the silence stretch. When's the last time any of you actually stayed at the Regent? I asked quietly. Dad blinked. What kind of question is that? A simple one. When did you last spend a night in your flagship property? Trevor shifted uncomfortably. We do regular walkthroughs. That's not what I asked. Mom tried to redirect. Honey, we're trying to include you in something important. The boiler failed last winter, I said. 3 times. Guests were moved to the Holiday Inn down the street, At your expense. The fire inspection in March cited 17 code violations. The kitchen staff walked out in April over unpaid wages. I counted each item on my fingers like I was reading a grocery list. Should I continue? The color drained from Trevor's face. Brandon set down his phone. Mom's hand retreated from mine like I'd suddenly caught fire. Dad's jaw tightened. How would you possibly know? I pay attention, I said simply. I always have. You just never noticed me noticing. The air in that private dining room changed temperature. What had been a choreographed pitch suddenly felt like an ambush, except I wasn't the one who'd been caught off guard. The Hartley Properties portfolio isn't positioned for evolution, I continued, my voice steady as bedrock. It's hemorrhaging cash. You're not looking for partners. You're looking for a life raft. That is absolutely, Dad started. I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table. Plain manila, but it landed like a bomb. Before we go any further, I think everyone should see what they're actually investing in. Trevor grabbed it first, flipping it open. His eyes scanned the first page, bank statements, profit and loss reports, contractor liens, and I watched his expression transform from confident to confused to horrified. Where did you get this? He whispered. Public records. Mostly. Some of it required talking to the right people. I looked at each of them in turn. You wanted me to invest $2 million. I did what any responsible investor would do. I performed due diligence. Dad's face had gone purple. You investigated your own family. No, I corrected. I investigated a business asking me for money. There's a difference. Brandon reached for the folder. Mom looked like she might cry. And Trevor just kept shaking his head. This can't be right, he muttered. But we all knew it was. ACT 6, the takeover, 400 words. That's when the door opened. Myra walked in, power suit, portfolio under her arm, the kind of entrance that made you sit up straighter without realizing why. Behind her came James Chen, my corporate attorney, carrying a briefcase that looked expensive enough to have its own insurance policy. Dad half rose from his chair. What the hell is this? This, I said calmly, is what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. Myra placed documents in front of each family member. James stood by the door with the casual alertness of someone who'd spent years in litigation and had seen every possible reaction to bad news. 3 weeks ago, I explained, Harbor Financial sold the debt portfolio on Hartley Properties to a private acquisition group. All outstanding loans, vendor debts, and property liens. The entire package. Trevor grabbed his documents, scanning frantically. The bank wouldn't, they can't just. They can when you're 60 days past due on multiple obligations, James said matter-of-factly. It's standard practice. Non-performing assets get sold to firms specializing in workouts and restructuring. Mom's voice came out small. Jess, what is he talking about? I met her eyes. He's talking about the fact that your family business is underwater. Has been for almost a year. You're lying, Dad said, but his voice cracked on the second word. I'm really not. I pulled out my phone, opened an email, and slid it across the table. That's confirmation from Harbor Financial. The acquisition closed yesterday at 2 p.m. Brandon looked up from his papers, face pale. Who bought it? What acquisition group? I let the question hang in the air for 3 heartbeats. Mine. The room went silent. Not the polite silence of people gathering thoughts, the stunned silence of people realizing they'd walked into a trap they'd actually set themselves. No, Trevor breathed. I own your debt, I said quietly. All of it. The mortgage on the Regent. The outstanding contractor payments. The liens. Every dollar you owe is now owed to me. Dad's hand trembled as he reached for his whiskey. You planned this. You come to my dinner. Your dinner. I laughed, sharp and bitter. You summoned me here to ask for money. I just chose to answer differently than you expected. Mom started crying. Real tears this time, not the performance kind. There's more, Myra said. James opened his briefcase and removed one final envelope. This one, he placed directly in front of Dad. That's a buyout offer, I said. $300,000. Enough to settle your personal debts and walk away clean. More than the equity is actually worth, if we're being honest. Trevor's voice shook. You're taking everything. I'm taking what you were going to lose anyway. The difference is now it stays in the family. I looked at Dad. The Hartley name can stay on the properties. I'll restructure the operations, fix what's broken, and actually make them profitable again. But not with you running them into the ground. I built this empire, Dad started. You inherited it, I corrected. And you're watching it crumble because you're too proud to admit you need help. So I'm helping. Just not the way you wanted. Mom reached for me. Jessica, please. This is our entire life. And it'll continue, I said, more gently. The properties will survive. They'll thrive, actually, once they're managed properly. You just won't be managing them. Brandon looked lost. So what? We're just out. You take the buyout, sign the papers, and move on. Or you refuse, and I proceed with standard foreclosure procedures. Either way, the outcome is the same. This way is just cleaner. Dad stared at that envelope like it was a live grenade. You're not my daughter. For the first time in my life, those words didn't feel like a wound. They felt like a liberation. You're right, I said, standing up and smoothing my jacket. I'm not the daughter who needed your approval. I'm not the daughter who kept hoping you'd notice me. I'm the daughter who learned everything you accidentally taught me about business, and I'm better at it than you ever were. I picked up my bag. Myra and James moved toward the door. The offer expires in 72 hours, James said. After that, we proceed through formal channels. I looked back at them one last time, not with anger, not with triumph, just with clarity. I didn't come here to save your empire. I came to end the part where you kept taking from me and calling it family. Then I walked out into the parking lot, climbed into my Tesla, and drove toward a future I'd finally stopped asking their permission to build. Behind me, the Cascades glowed like a stage set being struck after the final performance. And somewhere in that dining room, they were realizing what I'd known for years. Family isn't defined by blood or last names or guilt disguised as obligation. It's defined by who shows up when it matters. And mine only showed up when they needed something. My phone buzzed as I merged onto I-95. Mom's number. I watched it light up once, twice, then switched it to silent. Not blocked. Not yet. But not answered either. For the first time in 32 years, I wasn't waiting for their call. I was too busy building something they could never take from me, a life where my value wasn't measured by their approval, and my success wasn't something I had to apologize for. The city lights spread out ahead like promises I'd finally earned the right to keep. And I drove toward them without looking back. The end.